Hey everyone, welcome back to My Surprise Sister. Last episode was very emotional. We're still processing, I think, in a lot of ways. But I selfishly am really excited about this episode because this is all about how Cayla found out about me. And without that event, we wouldn't be sitting here. So this is all about Cayla's experience and really just the process of processing, I guess, this new revelation and this huge family secret. And so I'm really excited to learn more about your side of that.
Yeah, it's different and very different than your side of that, which we'll address next episode.
Mhm.
But um yeah, a little less emotional than last episode, which
It's good.
we both appreciate everybody's support and those who reached out about it. Meant a lot to both of us. So thank you.
Yes. So let's just dive in because like I said, I've been eagerly awaiting, like, learning more of this side of things, right? Um, so you went to your mom's house for your 25th birthday, and just leading up to that conversation, was it like a normal get together? Like, what was that like?
Should have known something was coming. While it wasn't abnormal for mom to randomly just decide we needed to get together, it was definitely a lot more pressure than there normally was. Um, Seeing as both of us, my sister and I, had to fly in from out of state. So, what it was my mom lived in Texas and she was going to go on a trip. So, she flew my sister in to watch the house and watch the dogs. And she thought it would be nice that I come in too, but I'd still also have to fly in. My sister was in California, I was in Arizona. So, it was a little bit more than just having to drive a couple hours to be together,
Great.
the three of us. So, um, I mean, she was persistent. She was telling us she was gonna buy tickets. She was gonna get us down. She's not a big birthday person for us. So I'm like, okay, sus, but let's go. Let's have fun. So
And
she,
25 is a big year, right? So like maybe it's one of those like, oh, it's a special birthday. It's a special.
I thought so. Um, but I still had that in the back of my head where birthdays really weren't a thing with my mom. They were just a normal day. You maybe got a dinner that you liked, but I'm like 25, I'm going through my quarter life crisis for the full 25 years now. Maybe it's maybe it's a special year. But she flew me in and was there a few days before my sister showed up, and I decided not to tell her that I was coming, and I made this whole thing where mom, a couple days after I flew in, met her at the airport to pick her up, and I stayed back in the parking garage and I had a sign that I had made and everything and popped it behind her. And uh, she really liked one of my dogs, Chloe May. So I had Chloe hidden behind the sign, and on the sign was a picture of her. And she's like, "Oh, I wish Chloe could be here." And I'm like, "Ha!" And Chloe was there with the big reveal of the sign, and it was all fun and dandy and stuff. And my flight back was a couple days after mom left, so we had a couple overlaps, and I think it just happened to fall on my birthday. I don't think it was purposeful. She flew out the day after.
Okay.
So that day, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, so were you guys just like chilling and having like a regular visit until she was like,
Yes,
okay, I'm leaving tomorrow? And
well, we knew she was leaving.
yeah.
And so we're chilling in the living room, and I noticed that her best friend, who's just an additional mom to me, starts gathering things like whatever she was working on, her knitting and stuff, and starts to disappear.
Okay.
And she's been around my whole life. Literally, she threw my baby shower for my mom. So she's literally been there. So it was kind of weird of like, okay, where you going?
Yeah. Why are you
And
just
then I know. So like just kind of let it go, like whenever she's got things to do. Um, and then my mom was like, "So I have something to talk about," and she kind of started into, as we know, your dad has had transgressions, and there are some things that we've had to do that we've kept secret. And one thing that I think it's time to share is that you have, or no, it wasn't you have, it was he had a daughter before you girls. And looking back, it was a lot about he did this, he did that. It wasn't you girls have, you have. It was very much like she was explaining actions of his, not necessarily what the results mean and what they were.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like, congratulations, you have a sister. It was, your dad done screwed up, and this is the consequence. Was it like
Yes,
kind of that?
yes. And the reason she explained she was telling us was, quote, it was his job once you girls were both 18, and clearly he's not doing it. And then after that, it turned into someone close to her recently found out, like within a year of that. So within months of that happening, she found out in her late 50s that neighbor girls she was raised with were actually half siblings of her parent. And nobody said anything. And so this woman who's very close to us, her world's upside down in her 50s. And her parents are both gone. So she doesn't have anybody to ask questions to.
Mm-hmm. And so that was kind
So,
of the motivator to let you know. So your
yes,
world can be flipped upside down during your quarter life crisis.
exactly. So that
Good.
way, at least the parents were around if we wanted clarifiers on anything. So, to me, it felt like just like every other anvil dropped, like a cartoon character of just your perspective changes on what you know. But that was a big deal. Was once we kind of got that information, it was, do you promise this is the last one? This is the last secret. This is the last anvil. And
Mm-hmm.
we've been promised that before. So I don't know. It's been 6 years, so maybe we're due for another anvil.
Oh,
You
we
never
get
know
on
with my
your
family.
birthday. Yeah. Well, on your birthday, I'm like, I wonder if we get another sibling this year. So
Hope on it.
maybe
Give me a couple
brother.
months.
Yeah, for sure. So
So
what was that like? Like, how did you do you remember that feeling? Like, because when sometimes like when I get huge news, like I have like a mini like panic attack. I get very hot and like
I was
panic,
mad.
like you were mad.
I was very mad and I was floored. And I remember being so upset. My poor husband. I was texting him not very much detail, but I was saying it's going down, it's hitting the fan, expletives throughout
Yeah.
the whole message. And he was freaking out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, do I need to come down? What's going on?" He said, "Is everything okay?" And I was like, "It involves my dad." And he's like, in his mind, he's like, "Oh my God, he just died. And she's in Texas. And he's in a different state altogether. And I can't be there." And so he's texting me like, "Do I need to fly out?" And he had a flight ticket set aside. He was ready to go. And it took like an hour and a half for me to actually step aside and call him. And when I told him, he was like, "Okay, well, that wasn't on my radar, things that was happening.
Yeah.
So good to know. Good to know. Do I need to fly out? I'm like, no, I think it's fine. So that's my ride or die. But
Yeah. I
it
mean,
was sweet.
side note, hopefully you all get to meet Bryson soon, but he is wonderful. Couldn't have asked for a better brother-in-law to just pop out of nowhere or for an uncle to my little. So I believe he would have come down in a heartbeat and just like rectified the whole situation.
Oh yeah. No matter what it was, he would have flown in not knowing what it was.
Oh, I'm sure. Not a doubt in my mind.
Oh yeah. He'd have been there. He's awesome like that. Um, so once I called off my troop of of my one husband of hey, stay back, it's fine. Then it kind of gave me a little bit more time to process, and mostly it was just anger of I a kid couldn't stand secrets. I don't understand why we have to hide everything all the time, and it was second nature for us. And it at this point, it's like I'm 20 freaking 5 years old. There's no reason
Mhm.
that we need to be like this. This is getting stupid. And with that, it didn't help that my birthday really wasn't acknowledged and my dad forgot it, which is
So
not the
he
first time he's done that. But obviously, it was the wrong birthday to do that. So
oh no.
the
So
fury.
and your mom didn't really do anything for it. It was just like, boom, here you go.
And then she
What
dipped
are you gonna
down the
say?
next day. She dipped the next day.
I made this up. Okay.
No,
So
and left me and my sister by ourselves in a different state with no way to escape each other with all of these feelings and emotions. And we have our whole lives, it's always been the two of us against everything. But we are two very, very different people. So we don't all when we don't get along,
yeah.
volatile. It's not mild disagreements. It is volcanic level explosions when we don't get along.
And this
And
rocked
he,
your foundation. So you had that.
Mount St. Helena, not even Pompeii. And she just dipped. I have
I
to
mean,
laugh.
I guess, I mean, let's look at the bright side. Like, at least she didn't tell you, like, on the way to the airport, like when you're pulling in to drop her off at the curb, right? What was that ride home like with you and your sister? Like, was it silence? Like, what was those initial conversations like the two of you like from your
We didn't
perspective?
speak about it for 2 days. So we were
So
already
you
at her
guys like
house.
in the home together, the two of you, and you guys just don't talk about like this me, a huge
Yes,
elephant in the room.
didn't. We didn't for like the first 2 days. We like went to the mall and had an emotional breakdown in the mall together.
It does.
That
Okay.
was a loud, volatile fight that had nothing to do with what we were fighting about, uh, which was the reaction to everything. She and I handle things very, very differently. And um, I was almost offended at how cool she was at handling it. I think she knew that. So, well, of course, she knew that. I told her that. So, it wasn't like a camaraderie together and finding this out until we had a couple days to regroup and rethink and all of that. Um, but I don't think we found solace in each other over the whole situation. Uh, we have two very different relationships with dad, and mine was a lot closer to him than hers.
Mm.
So she hadn't spoken to him for a few years at that point. So she hurts deeper and quieter than I do.
And you kind of do more of the outburst, emotional side of things.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Same.
So
Yeah.
that's his quality. That's how he works.
So tell me, what was it like? Like, how did he find out you knew? Like, did you call him and be like, yo,
This is one of my
we,
favorite parts.
or did he like be like, yo, girl, sorry I missed your birthday? Like, what was that conversation?
So when we were told, mom gave us your mom's first and last name and your first name. And she's like, well, obviously it's been a minute, so names could change.
Mhm.
Um, both or either or neither could be married, different last names, who knows? And I don't know what the shortened version is of her mother's name, if she goes by the long version or if there is a long version, because we got a short name from your mom that, I mean,
Yep. So my mom's name's Kathy. That's fine. My mom's name's Kathy,
okay,
right? And she's a Kathy. She's not a Kathleen, but that's a very common, right?
right,
And
Kathleen, Catherine, something. We had no idea.
yeah,
And then it's two women from the 80s, right? So by now, who knows if last names have changed or what. So we had like the world's worst information we could possibly have, other than I obviously was able to figure out the when and where because I knew my dad's history of when and where he went to college and
mm,
stuff like that. And we got a little bit of information about how mom found out. And
like how did that go down? Because she didn't know before they were married, right? Like she had already hitched her wagon to this fella, right?
so you were born in May,
Hmm.
and my parents got married in October.
So when
So
did they start date? How long did they date before they were
long
married?
before that, long
So
before
they,
May,
right, but it takes about a good 40 weeks for a kid to bake.
I never got a direct answer.
Mm,
And
okay.
I think uh, I would like to think that they just didn't track how long they dated. But in my family, it's also not uncommon to have a very short dating window before you get married. One of my cousins got married on the first anniversary of their first date. So it's not uncommon in my family to have 3 months of dating before you get married.
Right. And especially like because you come from a very religious family, and in the
Yeah.
religious community, that is a very common thing. Like
Right.
we've seen the Duggars, right? They go from hi, how are you? Courtship, married, baby, sometimes in a year.
In a year. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. From meeting to baby out and like in arms in like a year, right? So that's
Exactly.
not uncommon at all. So like,
I cannot foresee my mother having done that. So, without having actual concrete evidence, I think mothers involved at about the same time or right after, literally right after one another.
some more One Tree Hill-esque. So he's more like a Dan Scott, if you've ever watched One Tree Hill.
Yeah, I would say, what kind of a question is that? I've never seen One Tree Hill. Have you met me? Gosh. So, yeah, I would say it was it's actually more on point than you would think because yeah, actually. Um, went away, had a kid, came back, was married and surprised. So yeah, that's about the timeline.
Yeah.
And she wasn't told until she accidentally intercepted a phone call 2 weeks after they were married.
A phone call from who?
Your mother.
Oh,
Grain of salt, full of lies and secrets. So I'm only going off the information I'm told, which may or may not be accurate. But she got a hold of a picture of you, and all questions of is this actually his kid were just blown out the window, obviously.
so
So
he had come up with a new line of defense, I guess.
he didn't have any. How do you
Oh,
have that when you have a little mini you with hair? I make jokes. The joke is my dad's been bald like forever.
yeah.
But yeah, and even down to the point of he wouldn't even sign any child support checks. He was just so adamant on erasing that part of his life that my mom was the one signing them and sending them, and she handled all of that. And to my knowledge, she gave your mom a heads up before my mom left.
Yeah. And see,
Uh,
from my side, like I don't know much about that. All I do know is since we've connected, my mom has said that it was your mom that kept, child support agreements in place and was the one really taking the responsibility when it wasn't her responsibility to take, even as they were separating and moving on with their lives. She had the compassion to really, think about me. She didn't know what kind of family I was growing up in or financial situation or anything. And so she made sure that everything was handled the way it was agreed upon, and which kind of
yeah,
let him off the hook a little bit, which, knowing our mothers, they probably wanted him on the hook probably a little harder.
yeah, and I think especially when she was getting closer and closer to leaving, it was
Mm.
I'm going to be in the same situation this woman is. I need to have some level of camaraderie. And there's something about my mom's very much into women camaraderie, feminism. You know, she was a proud protester of like the Trump inauguration type, pussy hats for all type of person. So it doesn't surprise me at all that that was something she took on.
Yeah.
Instead of letting him handle it and fail, she was more concerned with making sure you and your mom were were getting your end of what they were able to provide.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know
So
that appreciated on our side, but it's so weird to talk about it because I feel as though like as close as we've become, like our parents don't really have anything to do with that, so like their drama is their drama, and we've been able to really shelter ourselves from all of that and not deal, which is really nice. Um, but the drama and the hardships I think that have come have really been between the relationships that we have with our actual parent, right? So what was when you finally decided it was time to talk to your dad? What was that? Like I've heard a little bit here and there, but like
not my finest moment. So
fair. And I'm
I don't
sure he
remember.
fantastically.
This is probably one of the biggest blowups. He and I have had a couple of big blowouts, and I did, but I got him on Zoom because, as I've briefly mentioned, I think it was the last episode, is that he's an actor, so he can cover stories very well. A skill I'm both proud and not proud that I've attained. But some of his tells are visual. So if I got him on the phone, have known if I was getting the truth or not, or straight answers or not. And this was not a story he's going to want to share and talk about. So I knew I had to have face to face, but we were literally across the country from each other. So I somehow got him on Zoom, and he could tell something was up. And he's like, well, what do you basically what you want, you know? And I'm like, well, I've got something I want to ask, but I don't know how to do it. He's like, well, just ask. I'm like, but I don't know the words.
So
And he
he
said,
had no clue at this point that your mother had
no,
told.
no.
Oh,
And we're 7 years past his deadline of when he should have done it. So I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to start this. And he said, spit it out. So I looked him in the eyes on my computer screen and I said, who the fuck is Lisa? And I used your last name at the time.
oh
And
no.
I've never seen a man physically shrink. And I have no idea what went through his head when I did find he shouldn't have told me to spit it out. I could have said it a little bit more tactfully, but I mean, what else? I had no idea how else. How do you lean into that? How do you lean into that? So shouted it out. Who the fuck is Lisa? And he said, where did you hear that name? And I said, not from you. And
I don't feel like that would be my first reaction. I'd been like, okay,
it was
we're gonna
definitely
do
an
this.
oh shit moment. And um, he said, where'd you hear that name? And I said, not from you. And then there was a pause. And I think in that pause, I said, that was the wrong question to start with, or something like that. Because in my mind, it was, what do you know so I can cover up the rest?
Mm-hmm.
In,
So you started the conversation thinking, okay, I'm not gonna get the truth here. So you went on the defensive, I'm sure.
I was on the defensive before I started the Zoom call. And I always describe it as I have my boxing gloves ready to go. I will never take the first swing, but they're on. And um, this was definitely, they were on, they were up, they were ready to go. And it just kind of went downhill from there. There were a lot of expletives on my side, which he does not speak with expletives, and he gets very offended when you do. He growing up, he was very much like, if you need to rely on curse words, then you aren't creative enough to use accepted language. So there was a lot of, well, there's no need for that in between um, sentences, but it basically boiled down to I never got anything from him as far as information.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I had all the information I needed. So I'm not pumping him for anything I didn't know. In my mind, this was, why didn't you tell me?
Mm-hmm. And did you get an
And
explanation, like the explanation you needed, you deserved?
no, and I never will. It always turns into when I would confront him with these anvils that I would talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Only a couple he was present for when there was only a couple times mom brought him over before she dropped anvils and stuff. And normally it turned into, why didn't you tell me? Why weren't you about this? And he would say, I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I'm very sorry for the mistakes I've made, and they've affected a lot of people. And he really should have had a career in public relations. He'd have done great in PR.
I do.
Uh, you would have looked like an intern compared to some of the things he does. And you're great at your job, and I know you are. So it was really not productive. And it ended with me saying, if you mess up anything else, I'm done with you and I will never speak to you again. And you can hold to that, because this is the last time I'm going to look like the damn fool in a secret that you have and in a lie that you've had. Because at the end of the day, I'm literally his kid.
Yeah, you are.
In all ways, not just biological. I was raised with this guy. I'm associated with this guy. I, by personality, am a huge daddy's girl. And I have spent decades defending him. So this was very much, you've got one more shot. And so I was 25 when I had to say that to my dad of, you screw up one more time and I'm done. I cannot do this for the rest of my life. And he did. 2 years after that, he had another screw up big enough that I told him I was done. And contextual, we'll get to that part because that is relevant to our podcast. So while they did involve you and what you and I are working through and towards, it wasn't you that affected anything. It
And
was how he handled a big part of our life that happened to be involving you.
and you know, like if I support whatever decision you make, like if you want to be, if you feel like it's healthy to have a relationship with him or not to have a relationship with him, either way, like I want you to do what's healthy for you and what you feel is best for you. Like, and you know that. Like, I
Yeah.
don't feel like I should be a part of that equation at all because that's not my
And
place.
we did that for 2 years where you and I were building a relationship. He and I still had one. And the two were separate. And that's okay. It's just like with my parents. I can have a relationship with my mom and my dad, and they aren't touching each other.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it was an explosive Zoom. Lots of tears, lots of cursing, and I think it was 2 hours.
Wow.
And
That's intense. So what was there like follow up to it? Because like, yes, it's explosive. There's a lot of feelings. And then so you both have to process again another big conversation, right? So you have your first huge conversation with your mom. You take a little while to process. You have, you know, the next one with your dad. Was there like a processing time and then you guys come back together? Or what was
no,
in your mind next for you?
my family doesn't process and then regroup.
Okay.
You handle it in the explosive, and then you deal with it on your own. And you're lucky if it ever comes up again. It's done. Move on. So I actually didn't overtly talk about you with him again for 2 years. He and I spoke maybe once every month or two
Right.
into my adulthood. So it wasn't uncommon to just not speak. But I also wasn't sure. It wasn't uncommon for me to be on the phone with him and be on speaker with his wife and her kids and stuff like that. And when I got the information from my mother initially, no one but my parents and then his parents knew. And she said throughout the separation and divorce, maybe her parents found out. But as far as she knew, only my grandma and grandpa on his side knew. So I don't get along with his wife, but I didn't want to implode a marriage if she didn't know. So I wasn't going to be the one to bring it up.
Yeah. And I feel like that's one, like you said, that's not your place. That's his place to tell his wife.
Right.
Um, and we know that she has her
Life.
beliefs
Oh,
and
yeah.
values um, that are quite different than what yours or mine are, or 99% of the country. Um, but yeah, I understand not wanting to bring that up to her and starting a thing because that's not good for your dad either, right? Like if you do want to ever have a relationship with him, like that's not something you want to do. Um,
I would love to implode a lot of things, and vindictively, I would love to get a lot of things off my chest, but what good would it have done? And at the end of
that's
the day,
the
like I've
thing.
said, I love my parents. I don't want to outright hurt them.
Yeah. And I feel like that feels really good in the moment. Like, yeah, I did it. But then you have to go and look at yourself in the mirror or lay with yourself at night with just you and your thoughts. And your heart is too pure to do anything like that. Like you could, there's no way.
I do in my head. I'll call you and say, I just want to. I did that actually like 2 days ago. I called you. I'm like, this is just how stupid things get. I'm just getting mad. So I'll do it like just to vent and get it out, but I'll never actually do anything about it. So I just, it wouldn't have helped. So I didn't talk about you with him for 2 years. Um, but who the hell are you? I've got a first name. I
Hmm.
don't know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
You're you're out there. I want to know about you. It's like, I'm going to be an adult about this, and I'm going to wait, and I'm going to process, because to me, that's what adults do, is
Okay.
keep their impulsivity in control. So it had been March was when I figured out, I didn't figure anything out. March was when mom told me. It had been about a month, and that's when I had the Zoom call with my dad. And then it was about a month after that, um, I told my full sister and then each of my parents, hey, I'm going to find out who the heck this chick is. And dealt with each of their reactions separately.
What, yeah, what was that reaction like for you? Like what?
With my sister, it was, I'm not going to do that. Um, she was still, and probably still is, processing a lot of the hurt that
Mhm.
everything was, and it has nothing to do with you. Everything has to do with the lies and the secrecy. So she basically put her hands up and was like, nope, I'm not involved. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's totally fine. I just want you to know, in case you see this name popping up, she is going to be part of my life. If that is the direction we go, I at least want to know who she is.
Right.
And with my dad, it was very, are you sure? Are you sure this is what you want? Are you sure? You
Do you
know,
think it's a serial killer or something?
I think it was,
Mhm.
do you want to make this real? Or can this be some abstract secret that we never have to address again?
Mm.
And my mom is like, girl might be crazy. As far as we know, she is a random stranger out in this world who happens to share some DNA. And that's really about it. We don't know anything about anybody. We don't know anything about her mother. We don't know anything about the last 30 years. We don't know. You need to go in guarded. You cannot go in with her as somebody you know. You need to be careful. And
Which I think is good advice, right? Because I could have been
yeah,
anybody. So
literally, you
totally.
could have been a serial killer I was reaching out to. We had no idea. So she tried coaching me a bit, and I ended up not following her advice, um, and was less cautious than I was advised to be. But it took a couple days from them to kind of deal with me dealing with them. When I did search for you, it was obvious. who I was looking at, even though it said a different city and state from what information we had. We had Minnesota information, and I had, luckily at that point, you hadn't changed your name. So you were still the same first and last name I had. It just said Nashville. And we were on our way to a friend's house to go have pizza and drinking and games and whatever. And we were in charge of pizza. So we were sitting outside of a Little Caesars trying to grab the pizza, my husband and I. And I was Googling you, found you on Facebook, and he's like, "Are you sure it's the right one?" And at that time, you had a side profile of your face for your profile picture. And for those that are watching on YouTube or something like that, we have the same nose basically. Mine comes in on the sides a little more, so it's more of like a hybrid of my parents' nose, but we very much have noses from a shared paternal figure. So, and they're pierced on the same side. So I saw this side profile and I'm like, oh God, okay, this is her. And my husband's like, are you sure this is her? And I showed him the picture and he's like, shit, yeah, that's her. What are you gonna do? I had to kind of sit on it for a minute. I'm like, I get this far. Like 10 minutes. But so I didn't know what to do. And I drafted this long text that I went back and edited. I sent it to my husband and was texting it to and from him, editing it. And then I copied and pasted it in Facebook Messenger to you. And it was all such a blur. Sitting in Little Caesars, getting ready to go meet friends, looking at an alternate version of me with a different name on Facebook, and looking at my husband just going, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. He's like, okay, do it. Then do it. And I did.
That you did.
Yeah.
Wrap
So it was
it.
another pivotal moment in my life.
It was for me too.
Oh, I bet. At least I had like 3 months of prep going into this.
Yeah. Nope. And so that I just had to dive right into it, right? And
Yeah.
so I guess now would be the good time to say, join us next time for when we dive right into that infamous message and how we kicked off our relationship.
I feel like the dive was my message. You got drug in. So
There's
stay
just a
tuned
push.
for next time when we drag ourselves into the deep end with the
Right.
infamous message.
Love it. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.